October 2nd, 1975. Darkness covered Imralı Island, one of Turkey's most notorious prisons. Inside, an American prisoner named Billy Hayes made a decision. Tonight would be different. He had a stolen knife, a small wooden boat waiting in the harbor, freezing water between him and freedom. 5 years in Turkish prisons, a 30-year sentence hanging over his head, and one chance to escape. How does a 23-year-old American end up in a Turkish prison for smuggling hashish? How does he survive 5 years in conditions that would break most men? And how does he escape from an island prison surrounded by sea? This is the story of Billy Hayes, the man behind Midnight Express. The story begins in 1967. Billy Hayes was 20 years old, a college student who decided to drop out. He felt bored with studying, wanted to break free, explore the world. During that time, Billy had a close friend named Patrick, a writer, a dreamer, someone who shared Billy's worldview and inclinations. They became very close. Billy needed money after leaving university, got a job as an assistant at a local hospital, simple work, modest salary. One day, while walking through the hospital, he passed a room where someone had a broken leg. He watched the doctors apply a plaster cast, wet bandages with plaster powder, layer after layer until it hardened. Billy thought to himself, that's an easy technique. He could do it himself. That detail stuck in his mind. It would matter later. Around the same time, one of Billy's friends returned from Turkey. He brought back small pieces of hashish from Istanbul. Billy tried it, immediately noticed the difference. Much higher quality than anything available in America. His friend told him hash was sold openly on the streets of Istanbul. Anyone could get it easily. He had just put it in his bag, got on a plane, and flew back to the United States. Back then, flying was casual, like taking a bus. No thorough searches, no scanners. People smuggled prohibited items onto planes with ease. That's why airplane hijackings used to happen. People could even smuggle weapons on board. Billy connected the dots. Turkish hashish was cheap and high quality. Airport security was almost non-existent, and he knew how to make a plaster cast. The plan formed in his mind. In 1969, at 22 years old, Billy took his first trip to Istanbul. As soon as he stepped out of the airport, a taxi driver approached. Billy asked about a well-known historic district called Sultanahmet. The driver immediately figured out what Billy was really looking for. Taxi drivers know tourists. From Billy's looks and the way he spoke, the driver could tell he was American looking for hashish. The driver took Billy to his house, served him tea, Turkish delight, let him play with his children, meet his wife and family. Later, the driver came back with hashish, let Billy try it. From the first puff, Billy knew this was exactly what he came for. The driver asked how much he wanted. Billy said a kilo or two. The driver returned with 2 kilos, $300. Adjusted for inflation, that's around $1,500 today. Still an amazing deal for 2 kilos of high-quality hashish. Billy took the hashish to his hotel. He had brought plaster bandages and all the materials he needed. First, he used adhesive tape to secure the bags of hashish to his leg, taped them over and over to make sure they wouldn't move. Then he wrapped plaster bandages around his leg, soaked in water, layer after layer. The plaster hardened overnight, holding the bags even more securely. The next morning, Billy checked the cast. Perfect, hard and firm. He took a taxi to the airport, walking with a limp. He didn't even need to fake it. The cast was so heavy and bulky, it made him limp naturally. At airport security, officers took his bags, rummaged through them quickly, closed them, let him pass. Billy boarded the plane with 2 kilos of hashish strapped to his leg. The plane landed at JFK Airport in New York. This was where the fear really kicked in. If caught with that much hashish, he would face serious prison time. He picked up his luggage, passed through customs, started walking toward the exit. Then came the problem he never saw coming. Pieces of his cast were falling to the ground, crumbling with every step, leaving a trail behind him. The bags of hashish inside had created lumps. The bandages hadn't bonded properly. Billy felt terrified. Any officer could notice something wrong with his cast. He tried to walk faster, but the faster he walked, the more the cast broke apart. That was the scariest moment of the whole adventure. But no one noticed. No one stopped him. He made it out of the airport. His plan worked. Back in America, Billy started selling the hashish in small portions, top-notch quality, highly sought after. He sold to his friends first, then their friends. Everyone loved it. He ran out of stock in less than a week. He had bought 2 kilos for $300, sold them for $5,000. Adjusted for today's money, that's close to $30,000 profit. But Billy had been broke for so long. When he suddenly had all that cash, he blew through it in a few months. Parties, trips, messing around. When the money ran out, he decided to do it again. October 1969, second trip to Istanbul, same taxi driver, same house, same deal, 2 kilos. This time, he didn't use the cast. Too suspicious. The lumps would cause problems again. Instead, he taped the bags around his stomach and chest, wore a loose winter coat. Billy was skinny, even with hashish taped to his body. He looked normal. Airport security gave his bags a light inspection. No one checked his clothes. He flew back to New York without issues. He sold the hashish, raised the price, made more money. April 1970, third trip, same method, same success. By then, Billy had full confidence in this operation. It had become his main source of income. Whenever he ran out of money, he simply went back to Istanbul. But between his third and fourth trips, major events unfolded in the Middle East. September 1970, Black September. Armed groups hijacked several airplanes, flew them to the desert, blew them up in front of cameras. The planes were empty, but the message was clear. Airport security across the region started tightening. More searches, more vigilance. Billy knew his next trip would come with greater risks. Turkey wasn't directly involved in the events, but it was part of the region. Still, Billy was overconfident. He had done it 3 times. He was sure he could do it a 4th. Arrogance blinded him. He met the taxi driver, bought 2 kilos, taped them to his body, put on loose clothes, headed to the airport. This time, he decided to be more careful. When he entered the airport, he stood back and watched from a distance, observing the security procedures. Everything looked normal. Officers checking bags quickly, letting travelers pass, no body searches. Billy assumed everything was fine. He went through customs. They stamped his passport, checked his luggage briefly, let him through. Then they put him on a bus to the plane. Billy found it odd. Usually passengers boarded through the terminal bridge directly, but buses happened sometimes. He didn't think much of it. An older woman sat next to him, started talking about her life, her son, what brought her here. Billy nodded and pretended to listen. As the bus approached the plane, Billy glanced out the window. His heart stopped. Soldiers and officers were standing in front of the airplane stairs. They were planning to search passengers before boarding. The worst-case scenario, something Billy never expected. If the search had been at the airport gate, he could have seen it from a distance, backed off. But now he was already on the bus, too late to turn back. The bus stopped. Passengers started getting off one by one. Billy sat frozen. The only solution he could think of was to stay on the bus, maybe go back with it. He got down on the floor, pretended to search for his passport under the seats. Meanwhile, officers were searching passengers thoroughly. Bags, bodies, clothing. The old woman asked what he was doing. He told her he was looking for his passport. She pointed to his pocket. The The edge of the passport was sticking out. She thought she was helping him. She had ruined everything. A soldier at the front of the bus was calling out, telling everyone to move. Billy had no choice. He got up and left the bus. He watched the 2 lines of passengers being searched. His only chance was to slip through, act like he had already been checked. He started walking quietly, taking advantage of moments when officers were busy with someone else, step by step. He managed to get past the first officer, reach the airplane stairs. All the officers were behind him. He lifted his foot to climb the first step. A hand grabbed his shoulder. An officer asked in broken English, "Where you go?" Billy pointed to another officer, said that one already searched him. The officer looked him up and down, called out to his colleague, asked if he had searched this guy. The colleague said no. The grip on Billy's shoulder tightened. "Hands up." Billy raised his hands. The officer started searching his body, hands moving down from the top. His hands passed over Billy's chest and stomach, right where the hashish was hidden. The officer kept going down, didn't say anything. Billy felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the loose jacket had worked. The officer went back up, started frisking him again from the top. Then he froze. He had felt something. The officer looked Billy in the eye, stepped back quickly, drew his gun. Bomba, bomba. All the soldiers pulled out their weapons, aimed at Billy. Billy stood frozen, hands still in the air, terrified they might shoot him right there. The officer slowly stepped forward, lifted Billy's jacket. Instead of a bomb, he found small bags of hashish. Hashish, hashish. Everyone lowered their weapons. Everyone except Billy. He knew this was just the beginning of the nightmare. The officers handed Billy to the police. They took him to a prison in Istanbul called Smuggle. First thing they did was shave his head completely. Then they put him into a ward. This prison was different. The inmates managed things themselves inside the wards. Guards rarely entered. They assigned prisoners to oversee other prisoners. Billy's cell was freezing. October is cold in Istanbul, no heating. The bed was just a metal frame, no mattress, no blanket. He asked the prisoner in charge for a blanket. The answer was no. But Billy noticed the cell door wasn't locked. Later that night, a voice called out from the neighboring cell. His neighbor told him there were blankets in another cell at the end of the hallway, gave him a wooden stick with a metal hook. Billy took the stick, made his way through the dark corridor, used the hook to pull blankets through the bars of the storage cell. He gave one to his neighbor, kept one for himself, fell asleep immediately. But the prisoner in charge came by during his rounds, saw Billy sleeping with a blanket, got furious. He tried to snatch the blanket. Billy resisted. They struggled. Billy punched him in the face. The prisoner ran out, came back with 2 guards. They dragged Billy to a basement. Inside was a rope hanging from a pulley. They threw Billy to the ground, tied his legs to the rope, pulled until he was hanging upside down. A 3rd guard appeared, a huge man named Hamid, head of the prison guards. He carried a thick baton. Hamid raised the baton, started beating Billy's legs. Billy screamed, begged, but Hamid showed no mercy. Billy didn't know how long the beating lasted. When they finally took him back to his cell, he couldn't walk. They had to drag him. For days afterward, he could barely put his feet on the ground. Billy was 23 years old. He had never been in prison before. He had to learn quickly when to speak, when to stay silent, when to stand his ground, when to stay calm. The worst part was the language barrier. Communication was incredibly difficult. A few days later, the prison administration gave him a chance to contact someone outside. International phone lines weren't available to the public in 1970. His only option was to write a letter. He wrote to his father, explained everything. The shame was overwhelming. He knew the news would bring his family great pain. Within a week, his father traveled to Istanbul, met Billy in prison with open arms, brought the American consul. Billy explained everything in detail. A few days later, Billy was sentenced, 4 years and 2 months. The sentence was actually light for drug smuggling. His father's lawyer had argued successfully that the amount was too small to classify him as a trafficker. He was charged with possession instead. If he had been tried as a smuggler, the sentence would have been much harsher. Still, 4 years of his youth, behind bars in a foreign country, Billy had 2 options: accept his fate or try to escape. Over the following months, he spent time learning Turkish, word by word, little by little. Eventually, he could communicate with other inmates. The prisoners often discussed escape, possible routes, ways to avoid getting caught. Some had maps of Istanbul. They talked about train lines connecting Turkey to Greece. But it was all just talk. The prison was heavily guarded. Killers, rapists, drug traffickers. Security was extremely tight. 18 months passed. Billy learned about a psychiatric hospital called Bakırköy, a place for criminals with psychological disorders. According to his fellow inmates, escaping from there was easier, less security than regular prison. Billy crafted a plan, convinced the administration he was mentally ill, get transferred to the psychiatric hospital, escape from there. But breaking out wasn't the hardest part. The real challenge was getting out of Turkey afterward. That's where Patrick came in, his close friend from before. Patrick would occasionally visit Billy in prison. During one visit, Billy explained his plan. Patrick supported it, agreed to help. They divided tasks. Patrick would get fake IDs and documents for crossing the border. Billy would convince the prison administration he was insane. Over the next few days, Billy started acting completely mad, screaming at guards, saying random things, behaving erratically. He was brought before 3 psychiatrists for evaluation. Billy delivered an Oscar-worthy performance, jumping around, freaking out when someone wrote something down. They were convinced, transferred him to the psychiatric prison for observation. The moment Billy stepped inside, he realized his mistake. The inmates were in a terrifying state, screaming, wandering aimlessly, staring at ceilings, completely disconnected from reality. And these weren't just mentally ill people. They were criminals, murderers, rapists, a combination of madness and crime. One inmate followed Billy everywhere, constantly asking for cigarettes. Another pretended to be a judge, putting other inmates on trial. A group walked in circles around a pillar. No purpose at all. Billy started doubting his entire plan. He wasn't sure he could survive this place. But at least the walls were low, cracks and uneven edges, not hard to climb. Security wasn't tight. He just had to wait for Patrick to complete his mission. Then a letter arrived from his father. Patrick had been found dead in his hotel room in Istanbul, a knife in his chest. To get the fake documents, Patrick had dealt with criminals. They found out he had money. Instead of helping him, they killed him and took the cash. Billy was devastated. He felt like it was all his fault. If he hadn't tried to smuggle hashish, if he hadn't ended up in prison, if he hadn't planned to escape, if he hadn't asked Patrick for help, his friend wouldn't have died. Dark thoughts consumed Billy. His family was suffering because of him. His friend had died because of him. He was stuck in a madhouse surrounded by lunatics. He genuinely wished he could lose his mind, go crazy just to forget everything. He started circling the pillar like the other inmates, acting mad like them. His spirit was broken. The idea of escape left his mind completely. A month later, his observation period ended. The psychiatrists evaluated him again. This time, he was calm, spoke with full mental clarity. Result: not insane. They transferred him back to the original prison. Billy made up his mind to serve out the rest of his sentence quietly, Less than 2 years left. He would finish them and get out. He had a calendar. Every day he crossed out a date. 54 days remaining, about 2 months. That day, the American consul came to visit. Billy was excited at first, maybe early release. But the consul's face was grim. The Turkish Supreme Court had changed his sentence. Billy felt the world spin. The original court had sentenced him for possession. Now the Supreme Court had changed the charge to drug smuggling. The new sentence, 30 years, possibly life. Billy was stunned. Just moments ago, he was counting down to release in 2 months. Now this? He returned to his cell not knowing what to feel. The despair and rage were overwhelming. His hands trembled. He cried. The thought of escape came back. There was no other option. The official ruling came 30 years, along with an order to transfer him to another prison. İmralı, an island prison, the whole island was basically a prison, like Alcatraz. The sea surrounding the island was the barrier. If a prisoner tried to swim across, it was basically a death sentence. But when Billy arrived, he noticed something different. This wasn't a typical prison, more like a labor camp. Inmates were allowed to walk around the island, semi-open facility. At the center was a canning factory where prisoners worked. Boats would arrive loaded with produce. Prisoners unloaded them, canned the goods. Billy noticed the boats had small wooden dinghies attached. These dinghies were packed with produce when they arrived, but returned empty. He spent a long time observing how the produce was unloaded when the boats left, where the guards stood. The boats always left immediately after unloading. Security was tight during the process, no chance to sneak aboard. Billy began to lose hope. Then came October 2nd, 1975. A storm was approaching, clouds gathering, sea getting rough, wind picking up. That evening, Billy noticed something different. The boats stayed put after unloading. The boatmen dropped anchor to secure them, waiting out the storm. Billy's eyes fixed on the small wooden dinghies, now empty, now accessible. The idea sparked. He couldn't shake it. He had to try that night. After the evening roll call, Billy lay in bed, waiting for the guards to leave, for things to quiet down. He reached under his mattress, pulled out a small knife wrapped in cloth, stolen from the factory weeks earlier. He slipped out through a window, made his way toward the garbage bins near the factory. He knew the guards' patrol routes, the watchtower spotlight patterns. He had memorized everything. When the path was clear, he headed toward the dock, walking slowly, cautiously. He reached the rocks leading to the shore, crawled across the sand toward the sea. This was the most exposed part. If a guard shined a light on him, they would spot him instantly. He crawled as fast as he could, reached the water. Freezing, he had expected it, but the shock still hit him. He swam toward the dock, toward one specific boat, the closest one. Grabbed on, pulled himself aboard, collapsed on the deck, trying to catch his breath. His body was shaking from the cold and fear, but adrenaline kept him moving. He pulled out the knife, started cutting the rope tying the small wooden dinghy to the larger boat. A window opened above him. Billy ducked down, curled up, hid in the small boat. The boat owner stuck his head out the window, right above Billy. If he had looked down, he would have seen him instantly. The man spat into the sea, then went back inside. Billy waited, a minute, maybe 2. Then continued sawing at the rope until it snapped. The small boat drifted away, carried by the waves. Billy grabbed the oars, started rowing. Farther and farther from the island. For the first time in 5 years, he felt free. But he was lost, floating in a vast sea, no idea which direction to go. He tried to estimate south based on maps he had seen in prison, pure instinct. Exhausted, worn out, but the adrenaline gave him strength. He told himself he would row until he reached shore or died. No third option. He kept rowing. At dawn, he saw the coastline. That gave him an extra push. He rowed harder, finally reached the shore. True freedom for the first time in 5 years. But he had to keep moving. The guards would discover his escape during morning head count. Billy made his way to the province of Bursa, the closest coastline to the prison, took a taxi to central Bursa, caught a bus to Istanbul. From there, he headed toward the Greek border, a province called Edirne. The border runs along the Maritsa River, one side Turkey, other side Greece. Billy reached an open area near the river, watched the soldiers from a distance, not many, one or two passing by occasionally. When the area cleared, he moved forward, staying low, creeping through a ditch. 2 border guards walked directly above him. He froze, curled up. They passed without noticing. He climbed out, ran toward the river, threw himself into the water. Terrified the soldiers might spot him, maybe open fire. No turning back, freedom or death. He swam to the other side, got up, started walking into the new land. He assumed he was in Greece, but he had never been here, still afraid he might somehow be in Turkey. He wandered through forests, exhausted, confused. A soldier saw him, came out of a small outpost, pointed his weapon, started yelling. Billy raised his hands, but he didn't understand a word. And since he could speak Turkish, he knew this was a different language. He had made it to Greece. Billy smiled, burst into laughter with his hands still raised, dropped to his knees from pure joy. The Greeks held him for about 2 weeks, interrogated him for any military intelligence about Turkey. When they were satisfied, he knew nothing. They coordinated with American authorities, sent him to Frankfurt, Germany. After a few more days of questioning, he was allowed to return to the United States. October 24th, 1975. 22 days after escaping from Imrala Island. When Billy arrived at JFK Airport in New York, a huge crowd was waiting. His story had gone viral. Media outlets, journalists, cameras everywhere. Front and center were his family. His father embraced him the moment he saw him. Within days, Billy was appearing on television, sharing his story. People expected him to be traumatized, need time to recover. The opposite happened. He became very public, transparent about everything. He announced he was writing a book. In 1977, Midnight Express was published. 1 year later, in 1978, a movie of the same name was released. The film became a massive hit, but it told the story in a distorted way, changed many details, portrayed Turkey in an extremely negative light. The movie caused a diplomatic crisis between Turkey and America, hurt tourism in Turkey for years. Billy himself wasn't okay with how the film was made. He said he had met many kind Turkish people. The director had completely ignored that side. Over the following years, Billy appeared in interviews apologizing for the image the film portrayed. In 2007, 30 years after the film's release, Billy received an invitation from the Turkish police to return to Istanbul. Friends and lawyers warned him he might get arrested. But Billy wanted to show how sorry he was. He traveled to Istanbul. They held a press conference. Billy kept repeating the same message. He apologized, said he loved Turkey and its people. After that visit, everything became peaceful. Everyone reconciled. The film incident became history. As of now, Billy Hayes is still alive, 77 years old. Remember the question from the beginning? How does a 23-year-old end up in a Turkish prison and escape from an island surrounded by sea? The answer is desperation. 5 years of suffering, a 30-year sentence, and the absolute refusal to accept that his life was over. A stolen knife, a stormy night, a small wooden boat, and the will to row until he reached freedom or died trying. Billy Hayes didn't just escape from prison. He escaped from a life sentence, from a foreign country, from the edge of despair. One man, one boat, one chance. And that brings us to the end of our story. If you like it, do not forget to like and subscribe and activate the bell button so that you can receive new videos.